What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Gage. Welcome to the channel. Today, I am excited to show off my Quickdraw Dandywarrior deck profile. This is a profile that is specifically from the 2010 Synchro era of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, and it is a very fun format. It's called Edison format, and it is the early Synchro era, and this is one of the few decks in which I feel as though we are really able to show off the synchro capabilities that we have this early on in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. So I'm not reinventing the wheel or anything here. What you're going to see is pretty standard, so I'm going to talk about my strategies, my thought process, and preferences for building the deck, and just highlight some cool cardboard. So if you're interested in types of content like this, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. So, of course, we can't talk Edison format without talking about the premier boss monster, Caius the Shadow Monarch. Just a fantastic card, amazing artwork with a very simple ability where if it's tribute summoned, you could target a card on the field and banish it. And if it just so happens to be a dark monster, you can inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent, which the burn damage is really just a bonus. You're really using it for that ability to get that targeting banish off. And yeah, it's simple but very effective. It is very easy for this deck in particular to be able to generate the bodies necessary to tribute into Caius. And so that is why I personally prefer to play it at 3 copies. However, I have seen some builds that choose to cut down to 2, even 1, or not even playing it at all. I just love the card too much, and if I have the ability to throw it into a deck, I absolutely will, and I think it does work well in this particular build. And it wouldn't be the Quickdraw deck without the namesake of the deck, and that is Quickdraw Synchron. It is a machine tuner monster that has the ability to special summon itself from the hand by sending one monster from your hand to the grave. And if you were essentially to synchro summon, you are able to substitute this name for any one synchron tuner name. So what that means in a nutshell is that it gives you access to these specific synchro monsters from the extra deck that usually require a synchron monster, and it takes the name of it so that it makes it easier to be able to give you access to those synchro monsters. And those synchro monsters in particular have very beneficial effects. So that is why I enjoy playing this card at 3 copies, because of the fact that it gives me the ability to potentially go into those very powerful synchro monsters. And I've seen some builds that have chose to cut down to 2. I totally understand that, but personally, I just want to be able to see it in my opening hand at all times. And worst case scenario, if I don't have access to a synchro play, I could also just use the body for a tribute for Caius as material for the tribute summon, or things of that nature. So I personally don't mind if I end up seeing extra copies, and so that's why I choose to play 3. And of course, you want to be able to see it in conjunction with another amazing card, and that is Dandelion. Dandelion is amazing because of the fact that when it's sent to the graveyard, you special summon 2 fluff tokens in defense position. They can't be tributed for a tribute summon during the turn they are special summoned. However, obviously, past that turn they are special summoned, you can then use them for tribute fodder, meaning that you can use them for Caius if necessary. But the reason that this is so good is because of the fact that if it's sent to the grave at all, it triggers. So if you were to send it to the grave off of Foolish Burial, if you were to tribute summon it for Caius, if you were to, I don't know, use it for synchro material, if you were to blow it up with Black Rose or Torrential Tribute, guess what? As long as it's sent to the grave, you're specialing those tokens, and those tokens you can then just use as tribute material the following turn, or you could use them for a synchro summon if you just so happen to have access to a synchro play. There are so many things that those bodies are able to help you with when actually playing this deck that your opponent does have to fear actually spamming out those tokens, because they could also just be used to prevent your opponent from being able to attack into your life points. So Dandelion is a very abusable card. Unfortunately, it is at 2 copies in this format, but we are going to play 2 copies, and it really doesn't hurt all that much because of the fact that we have the ability to tutor into it with cards like Lone Fire Blossom. Lone Fire, again, has a simple effect. You could tribute a face-up plant, including itself. to special summon a plant from the deck. And so that is what is able to get you access to your Dandelion so that you could start to get the Dandelion into rotation. And the great thing about the Lone Flyer is that you can also use it to get a copy of Titanial, which is another boss monster in the deck, which simply says when a card or effect is activated that targets a card or cards on the field, you can quick effect, tribute a face-up plant monster, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. So this is why it is very strong if you are able to get the Dandelion's plant tokens into rotation, because you could simply tribute off those tokens if you just so happen to utilize the Titanial's ability to prevent a card from targeting something on your side of the field. So Brain Control, for example, is a very powerful staple in this format, and Titanial essentially says, well, I could stop you from doing that, either by using the tokens, or, worst case scenario, just using itself to prevent your opponent from using your own monster against you. So there are many things that target in this format, and that's why Titanial is just a great card. I will say, it is unfortunate when you draw it. You really just want to be able to special summon it for free off of the Lone Fire. However, like I mentioned, there are many ways in which we can spam bodies onto the field. So worst case scenario, if we do need to use it if we do need to tribute into it in a pinch, we can absolutely do so. But of course, it does suck to draw. And for supplementary engines to the deck, I am playing 3 Raikou, just a staple monster that you could play in many different decks in this format that allows you to, on flip, you could destroy 1 card on the field and then send the top 3 cards of your deck to the grave. That is mandatory. So we are playing a lot of cards that just so happen to have synergy with the graveyard, such as the Dandelions, for example. So if you do mill it off of the Raikou, you do get access to those Dandy tokens. But just being able to also have a generic pop to target and destroy something on your opponent's field is very valuable, whether it's destroying a trap or a monster or a spell. You'd always want to be able to have access to removal in some way, shape, or form. And this deck is able to take advantage of that in many different ways. So Raikou is perfect for the deck. We love having access to extra removal, and of course, we also like the mills, and we are playing many different cards to be able to take advantage of the fact that we are sending cards from our deck to the graveyard. To help get us into the Raikou, I am also playing 2 copies of Super Nimble Mega Hamster, which on flip allows it to special summon a level 3 or lower beast monster from your deck in face-down defense position. So this is how you are able to also get access to your Raikou. So very standard play to be able to set the Nimble Mega Hamster. If your opponent attacks into it, cool, you're getting a free Raikou, and now you are automatically putting pressure onto your opponent, because now they might think twice about setting a back row or even setting a monster, because now they know that the Raikou is coming. And 1800 booty is actually pretty thick in this format. So yeah, love the Mega Hamster, love the fact that it gets me to the Raikou. It isn't great always seeing 2 copies. I have experimented with just being able to play the 1, but I feel as though being able to get the engine online by getting access to milling as quickly as possible is key in order to combo. This is a combo-oriented strategy. So 2 copies is kind of the sweet spot, but it does, I will say, it is less than ideal if you do end up seeing multiple. And I am playing 1 copy of Cyber Valley, so I really just tech this in for the Road Warrior combo, which I could certainly show off towards the end of the video that I learned from E3 Yu-Gi-Oh! Just a very solid combo that I felt as though was very strong for this type of strategy, but even not taking that combo into consideration, the card itself is just very powerful. The fact that it has 2 really good effects and 1 just alright effect that does come up sometimes, where when it is targeted for an attack, you can banish it and then draw 1 card and end the battle phase, so that can help stall you for time, as well as help you dig deeper into the deck so you could see the cards that you need to see. And then its second effect lets you target a face-up monster you control and this card. You banish both of them to draw 2, and in Yu-Gi-Oh! We kind of like drawing cards. So yeah, those effects are really good. I will say the third and more niche effect is that it can target a card in the grave, banish both this card and 1 card from your hand, and then you can place the target from the graveyard to the top of your deck. So in a pinch, it can help if it just if you just so happen to need a certain card that you want to draw into or potentially mill. So it doesn't come up as often for me, but it is an option that is nice to have and remember. So I'll show off the reason why I actually want to play it once I actually talk about the Road Warrior combo a little bit later in the video. And I am playing the 1 copy of Treeborn Frog. I figure that we want to max out on as many cards that have graveyard synergy as possible, and once per turn during the standby phase, our standby phase, if this card is in your grave and you do not control the Treeborn Frog, you could special summon this card. So you have to control no spells or traps, but very rarely are we going to just have spells and traps that are hanging out in our back row. We are playing mostly monsters, and the spells that we do play are not necessarily continuous, so they usually go to the graveyard after we are done with them. So yeah, Treeborn really just represents a free body every single turn that you could either use for tribute material. It can help get you to different types of level combinations to climb into different types of synchro monsters. So Treeborn is very versatile, and that is why I enjoy playing it in this deck. Similarly, we are playing Level Eater, which is also in tandem with that Cyber Valley combo that I was alluding to a bit earlier. It says if it is in the graveyard, you could target a level 5 or higher monster you control, reduce its level by 1, and if you do, you could special summon this card. So again, another body that you can potentially get out to help you synchro climb, fix some of the math on the synchro monsters to help you go into different synchro options. And yeah, this is it's just a fantastic card. I love any card that is able to have any synergy in the grave when we're playing a deck that is, primarily doing a lot of milling. So yeah, Level Leader is just a solid option, and you'll definitely get to see it shine once I show off that combo later. I'm also playing 1 copy of Necrogardna. Very simply, during your opponent's turn, you can banish it from the grave to negate 1 attack from a monster your opponent controls. So this can really help save you in a pinch if your opponent is able to get access to something that might be threatening one of your monsters. You can go ahead and banish this from the grave to protect that monster. You could use it to be able to protect your life points in a pinch as well if your opponent is attempting to go for a game. So like I said, we're milling, we're sending a lot of cards to the graveyard, and this is yet another card that has synergy in the grave. I'm playing 1 copy of Plague Spreader Zombie. This is one of the few cards that allows us to go into synchro monsters in the deck that are not using the synchron monsters. So it gives us a little bit more generic access to the extra deck, which I feel is still valuable to have, especially in this format. And of course, it's great in the grave. If this card is in the grave, you could place 1 card from your hand on the top of the deck and then special summon this card, but it does get banished when it leaves the field. So it isn't as abusable as it is in, say, something like an actual zombie deck, but it's still very good because at the end of the day, it gives you access to a free body, which you can then use as synchro material, or worst case, if you need to use it for a Caius tribute summon, you could do so as well. Again, just play as many things that have uses in the graveyard. There are going to be many things in which you're sending monsters to the grave from your Quickdraw Synchron, or whether it's milling from the Ryko, or many different reasons as to why you want to play these types of cards. So Plague Spreader is great in the grave. I'm also playing 1 copy of Card Trooper, where once per turn you could choose a number from 1 to 3. Most of the time it's going to be 3. Then send that many cards from the top of the deck to the grave, and it gains 500 for each card sent to the grave that way. And until the end of the turn, it continues to retain that attack. So if you send 3, that means your Card Trooper will be at 1900 attack. However, it also has another decent effect where if it's destroyed and sent to your grave, you draw a card. So if you just so happen to, run into a torrential tribute, or if your opponent attacks into it, whatever the case may be, once it's sent to the grave, destroyed and sent to the grave, you get that draw. So just a solid card. As you see, we're playing many different cards that have synergy with the graveyard, and Card Trooper is yet another reason and way that we are able to send cards to the graveyard. I'm also playing 3 copies of Debris Dragon, which is incredibly powerful. This is one of the best normal summons in the deck by far. It is a Dragon Tuner, level 4, that on normal summon can target a monster with 500 or less attack in your grave, and special summon that target in attack position, but negate its effects. But this specifically cannot be used as synchro material except for the synchro summon of a dragon. So there are many very powerful dragon synchros in the game, so that is not necessarily a downside. This is one of the cards that you can get you very easy access to the very powerful dragons like Black Rose Dragon or Stardust Dragon, which are just staples in the format. And the fact that it is able to special summon a monster from the grave means that you will be able to get very easy access to synchro plays, because you may have noticed many of the cards that we have talked about up until this point are within that 500 attack or less threshold. So there are so many different targets that the Debris Dragon has at its disposal, and that is why we want to be able to max out on this, because it is just so free. We are sending so many cards to the graveyard via milling or discarding or what have you, and so the Debris Dragon is almost always online, and your opponent has to be able to respect the fact that this can bring out some very, very powerful boss monsters from the extra deck. And so, lastly, for the monsters, I am playing one copy of Sangan, just one of the bridges to almost everything in the deck, because if it's sent to from the field to the grave, whether for synchro material, tribute, torrential tribute, you name it, you could go ahead and add a monster with 1500 attack or less from the deck to your hand. So, again, that is pretty much everything in the deck. The only things it's really not grabbing are your Mega Hamsters, your Caiuses. There are so many different cards that you can get with the Sangan that it would be foolish not to play it. So that is why, no matter what, you have to play the one copy, just because of the sheer versatility that it provides. And lastly, for the monsters, I am playing one copy of Gores and one copy of Drag. Also, just fantastic staple cards in the format. Gores in particular was a menace in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! For so long. Your opponent always had to respect Gores, and there's a very good reason why. Essentially, when you would take battle damage from a card in your opponent's possession, so whether that be battle damage or effect damage, you could special summon the Gores from your hand. You have to control no cards to activate and resolve this effect, but as I alluded to earlier, we are not really going to be finding ourselves in a position where that happens all too frequently. However, once it is special summoned by its own effect, you can then also activate another effect based on the type of damage that you took. One of the more popular options is going to be battle damage, because obviously most of the time your opponent is going to be using battle as a means to be able to bring down your life points, especially in the Edison format. And if you do just so happen to take battle damage, you can also special summon a Emissary of Darkness token that gains the attack and defense equal to the amount of damage that you took from that battle, which is just incredible. If your opponent attacks you with, I don't know, for example, a Stardust Dragon, you can go ahead and guarantee that you are special summoning a 2500 attack monster, which you can then use to trade with your opponent's Stardust Dragon on the following turn, assuming that you survive. Gores is just a very powerful hand trap because your opponent always has to respect it. The other hand trap that is very much worth mentioning, and I feel like lives in Gore's shadow to a certain degree, is Tragoedia. Very powerful. When you take damage, you could special summon it from the hand, and it gains a 600 attack for each card in the hand. Once per turn, you could send a monster from your hand to the grave to target a face-up monster your opponent controls with the same level as the monster that you discarded to take control of it, and that does come up pretty frequently. And lastly, it has the ability where once per turn, you could target a monster in your grave. This level becomes the same as that target's until the end of the turn. So Trag is just an incredibly versatile card. It has so many different effects that in many different ways can help you get back into the game. If you have a ton of cards in your hand, he's very powerful. Gaining 600 attack and defense for each one is nothing to scoff at, for sure. And I really like it for the ability to target a monster and then it becomes that level. We are playing so many different cards that are many different levels. And so because of that, essentially, if you have a loaded graveyard, your Trag is going to be able to pretty much be whatever it needs in a pinch if you need to get access to synchro plays. So both of these are very powerful at just being able to make sure that you can protect yourself. And so that is why I feel like if you can play it in your deck in Edison format, then you absolutely should. And that's it for the monsters. I'm going to go over the spells. I am playing 3 copies of Pot of Avarice. This is a deck in which we are milling a lot, so we don't necessarily want to mill ourselves out, and we want other ways to be able to recur our resources and also gain card advantage. And Pot of Avarice is essentially Pot of Greed in this deck, because it says target 5 monsters in the grave, shuffle all 5 back, and draw 2 cards. That's incredible. I mean, it means that we are, even if we do end up getting unlucky and milling some monsters that maybe we don't want in the graveyard, we can always just shuffle it back and potentially draw it again. We are playing 3 copies because, as you see, between the card troopers, between the Quickdraw Synchrons, between the Rykos, there are so many ways in which your grave is going to be loaded with monsters, and so this is almost always going to be online. So 3 Pot of Avarice is recommended if you are playing a quick draw based deck. And for some staple spells, I am playing 1 charge of the Light Brigade. You can send the top 3 cards of the deck to the grave for cost to add 1 level 4 or lower Lightsworn from the deck to your hand. So it is just very powerful at being able to get your plays going, get you access to your Ryko, and it's essentially for free. We're playing 1 Book of Moon, which is very powerful in the fact that you can use it offensively and defensively. It allows you to, if your opponent, for example, if you set a Ryko and your opponent lets it live, maybe they just didn't attack into it or they weren't able to deal with it on that turn, you could go ahead and flip your Ryko, target 1 card your opponent controls, destroy it, mill 3 cards, and then Book of Moon to place it back face down so that you can then go ahead and use it a second time. So, or if your opponent just so happens to control a monster with a large number of attack, but maybe it has a weak defense, you can go ahead and just put it in face down defense, and that way it becomes a lot more manageable. Or if your opponent is playing a Floodgate monster, for example, like Artlord Christia, you always want to make sure that you have access to some type of removal to be able to make sure that you are not locked out from playing the game. So Book of Moon is, I'm always been a fan of it, and that is why I still play it at a copy. I'm playing Heavy Storm, Spells and Traps, especially the traps are just very, very powerful in this format. So being able to have access to mass removal is always going to be in our favor. As I mentioned earlier, Brain Control is just a very powerful staple card in the format. Probably one of the most ban-worthy cards if we were to ever actually go back in time to consider cards for putting on the ban list, because it really is just an unfair card. You just simply pay 800 life points, which, let's be fair, that is not really relevant in the slightest, and then select a face-up monster your opponent controls and take control of it until the end of the turn. It does not lock you out of using its effects. It does not lock you out of using it for tribute or synchro summon. It does not stop you from using it to attack. It is just very versatile in what it can do, at least in this format, because this is pre-errata. So yeah, this is just fantastic. You could go ahead and take one of your opponent's monsters, and there have been so many times where I've just used their own monster to go ahead and swing for game. Like I mentioned, you could use the monster for synchro material, tribute material, whatever you need. Brain Control is just one of the most powerful cards that you can have, and yeah, you just kind of have to play it in every deck. Of course, we're playing the 1 Foolish Burial. Like I mentioned, this is just one of... we're playing so many things that are good in the graveyard, and just being able to send any monster that we choose from the deck to the grave is just very versatile. And I'm playing the Mystical Space Typhoon. Target a spell or trap on the field, destroy it. Everybody knows what it does. Very simple, but very effective. And then for the 3 traps that I am choosing to play, I'm pretty much just choosing the best ones. I am playing 1 Mirror Force, Torrential Tribute, and Bottomless Trap Hole. I love the fact that we still need access to massive board removal, so Mirror Force and Torrential are still really good at being able to, if things get sticky, things don't necessarily go your way, you have contingencies in the deck to be able to help equalize the playing field. But Bottomless is also just good in its own right because when your opponent summons a monster with 1500 or more attack, destroy it, and then you can banish it instead of sending it to the graveyard. And there are many times in which you might not want your opponent's monster to go into the graveyard. So the Bottomless Trap Hole is for those instances in which, yeah, maybe we do have access to a Torrential Tribute, but it would be in our better interest to actually banish that monster. For example, Machina Fortress is something that has the ability to recur itself, so that is something that we would rather not want to deal with. We would rather just banish it, get it out of play, and not have to worry about it. So that is why I still choose to run Bottomless. Now, these three are the few that conflict with the cards in the deck that require for us to have no spells and traps in our spell and trap card zone. So that is referring to Treeborn Frog. It is referring to Gores and Trag. However, the thing about it is that we always just know based on our hand what it is that we're going to go for. You obviously are not going to set these cards if you plan to use the Gores to protect yourself on the following turn, things of that nature. It's really just kind of reading the board state, looking at what options you have in your hand, and choosing what you think is going to be best in that instance. So that is it for the main deck. I'm going to quickly go over the extra deck. I am playing 2 copies of Drill Warrior, just one of the best cards to be able to go into, and one of the reasons why this deck was so popular back in the Edison format. It says once per turn during the main phase, you can half this card's attack, and if you do, it can attack your opponent directly, which is very strong. A lot of the times you can straight up just ignore your opponent's board and poke at them for 1200 attack every single turn. And if your opponent does not have access to being able to deal with the Drill Warrior, then that could just spell them the game right then and there. However, it has another great ability where once per turn you could discard a card, and if you do, banish this card. Then, during the next standby phase, you could special summon this banished card and then add a monster from your graveyard to your hand. So that is just incredible. The fact that it means that you can set up a loop where you can go ahead and discard something like your Dandelion, which will then get you your tokens, and then you are getting the Drill Warrior back so that you can continue to either grab the Dandelion back from your grave, you can use it to grab any of the Quickdraws that were sent to the grave for Synchro material back to your hand. So Drill is just a resource machine and is the reason why you really want to be able to utilize the Quickdraw Synchrons in the deck. So Drill Warrior is incredible, and I definitely recommend it at 2 because just in case if your opponent does just so happen to deal with the 1, you at least know you have access to another. I am playing Junk Warrior, which is really just being used as a level 5. Its effect honestly does not come up, but it is part of the Road Warrior combo that I'll discuss shortly. I am playing 1 Junk Archer. Once per turn, you can target a monster your opponent controls and banish it. The banished monster returns to the field during the end of the turn. However, that doesn't really matter because usually if you go into this, you are usually trying to go for game. So if you know that you can go for game and you just need to get rid of a big threat, go ahead and banish it. And then you could go ahead and just win the game from there. I am playing 1 copy of Turbo Warrior, and this is fantastic in its own right. When it attacks a level 6 or higher Synchro monster, half that monster's attack until the end of the damage step. So this is one way in which you can get over being able to deal with a Stardust Dragon, for example. And it can't be targeted by the effects of level 6 or lower monsters. So that could be Raiko. That's all the Monarchs, such as Caius. So that protection is actually very relevant. And I just love the fact that we have the ability to go into such a strong card. It is situational, but one that is safe to go into nonetheless. I'm playing 1 Nitro Warrior. It has kind of a niche effect where once during each of your turns, if you activate a spell, it gains 1,000 attack. During its next attack, for the damage calculation only. So it only ends up just doing it once, but that can make the Nitro Warrior very beefy if necessary. And then once per turn, if this attacking card destroys a monster by battle, you can change a face-up defense position monster your opponent controls and change it to attack position, and then you get to attack it a second time, giving it like a pseudo BLS effect. So yeah, I will say it doesn't necessarily come up all the time, but if you just so happen to find yourself in a board state where the Nitro Warrior is useful, it can be the play to go ahead and go into this. And then the last kind of synchro monster that we are playing is Road Warrior, where it has the ability to where once per turn, you could special summon a level 2 or lower warrior type or machine monster from your deck. So that is what I was alluding to earlier with the Cyber Valley. That is the target that we are trying to get into off of the Road Warrior's effect. And might not be able to happen all the time because you need a specific sequence of cards to do so that are in your hand. But the fact that this is in the extra deck means that if I do just so happen to see the play where I can get into this, you can go into the Road Warrior on turn 1, which is very, very strong. For the Dragon Synchro monsters, the level 7s we're playing are Black Rose Dragon and Ancient Fairy Dragon. Black Rose simply has the ability to tribute itself to go ahead, when it's synchro summoned, to go ahead and destroy, well, not tribute itself, but when it's synchro summoned, you can destroy all cards on the field. And then the Ancient Fairy Dragon actually has the ability to, once during the main phase, special summon a level 4 or lower monster from the hand. Really, there's a lot of times where you just kind of need it for the 3,000 booty because that 3,000 defense can save you if you need to stall a bit. But we want to be able to play the best Debris Dragon targets that we can go into since we are locked into Dragon Synchros in particular. And these are just the two that are just the best to play. We are also playing, of course, to Stardust Dragon. This is the namesake of the format as the token Synchro monster. When a card or effect is activated that would destroy a card or cards, quick effect, you contribute this card, negate the activation, and destroy it. And during the end phase, if this effect was activated this turn, you can special summon this card from the grave. So this is your anti-Mirror Force. This is your anti-Torrential Tribute. There's so many cards in this format that can destroy monsters on the field. And so Stardust Dragon essentially just tells your opponent, no, I'm here to stay, and you're going to have to find a way to deal with me or you're going to lose the game. And for another really strong dragon, I am playing Red Dragon Archfiend. If it attacks a defense position monster that your opponent controls, you could go ahead and destroy all defense position monsters your opponent controls after damage calc. And during the end phase, destroy all other monsters you control that did not declare an attack this turn. That's fine. I mean, if your opponent is sitting on just a bunch of defense position monsters, this essentially just acts as a mass board wipe. So Red Dragon Archfiend is a solid dragon. And then one Iron Chain Dragon, just so that we have a level 6 that we can get into off of the Debris Dragon, since we are locked into dragons. I will say that its ability is kind of niche, but it does get the job done, where when it inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you could send the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck to the grave. So, might not always want to necessarily do that, just because yeah, your opponent might be able to actually take advantage of the cards that are in their graveyard. Really, it's just there to have as a target, just in case if you do have a level 4 and only have a level 2 to go into from your Debris Dragon play. I am playing one copy of Brionac, where once per turn you can go ahead and essentially discard as many cards as you want from your hand, and you can go ahead and target cards your opponent controls and return them to the hand for each of those cards that you are discarding. So this is just incredibly broken. It's why it's at one copy, this format. Unfortunately, it is a sea serpent. So yeah, it's even though it has dragon in its name, unfortunately, it is a monster we cannot go into off of our Debris Dragon, but it is still great because of the fact that we do have access to the Plague Spreader Zombie and many ways to be able to get into this. So yeah, you still have to play it. It's one of the strongest boss monsters in Edison format. And then last but not least, Gaia Knight. This is a solid monster to go into because it has the magic 2600 attack number that just so happens to get over an opposing Stardust Dragon. So guys, that is it for the profile itself. I'm going to quickly just kind of fix up the field a bit with editing magic and then show off what I was talking about with. All right, and through the power of editing magic, we now have the field set up for that combo. So I just want to show off something that's fairly simple. Again, I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I learned it from E3 Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't even think he necessarily invented it either, but that is where I picked up this particular combo, and I felt as though it was relevant enough for me to want to implement in my own strategy. So yeah, this combo is pretty simple. It just requires for you to have the Quickdraw Synchron, the Level Eater, and then pretty much any level 3, which we're playing a suite of fairly decent level 3 monsters in the deck. So I'm just going to go ahead and show off what it would look like with essentially the worst one. But obviously, if any of these ended up being your normal, it would be pretty beneficial to have these in the combo too, but just showing off the different options you can use depending on the hand. So what we're going to do here is we're very simply going to, you guessed it, discard the Level Eater to special summon the Quickdraw Synchron. You can then go ahead and normal summon your card Trooper, and then you can use Level Eater to go ahead and eat a level off of one of the monsters, and then special summon itself. Now we have the materials necessary to synchro summon into the Road Warrior. On top of that, your Road Warrior will go ahead and special the Cyber Valley from the deck, and your Level Eater will go ahead and eat a level off of, for example, your Road Warrior, and special summon itself from the grave yet again, because it is not once per turn. You can then use the Cyber Valley as well as the Level Eater to banish, and then go ahead and draw 2 more cards. So while it was a 3-card combo, it realistically can come up, and that was essentially with just those cards. So you will have 2 other cards in your hand, as well as another 2 cards that you just drew off of the effect of your Cyber Valley. So that is just, one of the very standard combos that you can go into from being able to play this deck. Your graveyard will be loaded up so that it makes it that much easier for you later down the line to be able to put your Pot of Avarice and make sure that it is live. It is loading your grave with a potential monster that you could use to special summon off of your Debris Dragon. So yeah, and then of course your consolation prize is a 3,000 attack monster on the very first turn if you choose to do so on the first turn. So I felt as though it was strong enough to be able to play. It seems very simple in retrospect, but it is something that is worth going into, especially given how slow the format for Edison is. So guys, if you're still sticking around up until this point, you're an absolute real one. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you've played this strategy, let me know what variant you've chose to play, what techs you've chosen to put in your own build. I think that this is a very fun strategy. It is very much overshadowed by some of the stronger decks in the format, such as Black Wings and Bayou Turbo variants of Black Wings. The fact that Deck Devastation Virus is in the format is honestly the thing that really makes this not necessarily the most tournament viable any longer, because there are so many different targets because of the fact that we're playing so many low attack monsters rather. So it is susceptible to blowout cards like that. So it is unfortunate. I feel like Edison format would be even more perfect if we didn't end up having kind of cancerous cards like that, because it does limit deck building diversity by having those things in the format. But, of course, a lot of the time I am playing casually with friends, and we just gentlemen out of being able to use some of those cards just to make the games a little bit more fun and interactive. And if you just so happen to have a group that plays similarly, then you will have an enjoyable time playing in the early Synchro era. So that's all from me. Again, thank you so much, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, GG.